Hello everyone and welcome to this latest video discussion as part of the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS for over 12 years now, and I work within our knowledge and practice part of the organisation. And my role is to look at the impact of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. And with over 110,000 qualified members working worldwide right across the property life cycle, from land, planning and development, construction, valuation, brokerage, finance, building, operation, building surveying and end of life. It's a really broad canvas upon which data and technology is having very, very profound effect. And indeed our members work across all the major asset types: land, residential, commercial, alternative assets and infrastructure. And I'm really pleased to have Camille from the Network Control Group and Tim from Univers joining us today. So Camille, perhaps if I could start with you with a bit of an introduction and a bit of a background to Network Control Group.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. So yeah, my name's Camille. I'm the commercial director here at NCG, and I've been with the company since launch 4 years ago. In a nutshell, we're an internet service provider and a master systems integrator. So we deliver a range of technology solutions across the real estate market. In partnership with Univers, represented here by Tim, we can offer our customers an end-to-end energy transformation solution, which includes granular data collection, energy monitoring, carbon reporting, microgrid management, solar, wind, battery storage, and EV charging. The partnership works in the way that NCG will take care of the design, the infrastructure installation, and all of the ongoing support, whilst Univers is our chosen software partner. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Camille. Thank you, Andrew. So my name is Tim Parsons. As Cam mentioned, I work for Univers. Been with Univers for about 18 months now, but I have a wider range of working over 10 years in the plan, build and operate life cycle of large infrastructure projects, both here in the UK and further afield, particularly in Southeast Asia. In terms of Univers, as Camille mentioned, we have a wide range of different software applications that help organizations go to net zero through the generation, the storage and the using of energy in a more efficient, more effective manner.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Camille. Now, I'd like to start with you, Camille. And you know, we're clearly in a landscape now where all the participants in real estate are under real pressure, both from a cost and a sustainability perspective to actually managing energy. I mean, what would you say from a landlord perspective are the biggest challenges when facing that issue of how they manage energy?
So I think there are several key challenges facing our landlord customers when it comes to being more energy efficient, controlling costs, reporting on emissions, all that kind of thing. The first one is fairly obvious, but it is critical, and that is the general lack of reliable, easy to understand data around things like energy consumption, so gas, heat, water, electricity, energy wastage, and occupier behaviours at both a site and a portfolio level. This makes it very hard to know which issues to tackle first and where to allocate scarce capital and resources, which is in itself an issue. Many real estate teams are small, people have to wear many hats and are often undertaking repetitive manual tasks that can suck up a lot of time. And then, manually collating energy data on top of that, for example, is just adding to this workload. There are obviously regulatory pressures and governmental targets being imposed on the commercial real estate industry, even though there is a bit of uncertainty at the moment around policy direction. Tenant expectations are also rising when it comes to being conscious of both utility costs and the carbon footprint of buildings. And this in turn affects where people choose to locate their office or their workshop or their plants, particularly if they are themselves a large energy consumer. A lack of technological integration across systems and overly manual processes, and of course cost. So deploying new systems or integrating existing solutions does come at a cost, and often payback periods can be long and off-putting, especially if systems like solar or wind aren't designed correctly. And then second to that, access to green financing can be seen as overly complicated, although it's something we aim to facilitate through a network of partners. And then lastly, and most obviously, energy pricing volatility, particularly in the last couple of years, which has been driving a need to be more resilient and grid independent.
Thanks, Camille. And Tim, it'd be great to get the perspective of almost that same question, but from the kind of occupier perspective. What's your sense of those challenges viewed from that other side of the fence, if I can use that phrase?
Yeah, absolutely. So naturally, with the swings kind of upwards of energy prices over the past kind of year or so, and the costs associated with powering occupiers' properties is a massive concern across the board. So what can they really do about this? I guess one of the key things, and one of the key aspects, to really fully understand the energy usage patterns to determine wastage. So, I mean, for example, we recently worked with a very large bank. They discovered in one of their particular buildings, one single floor was consuming more than the other 6 floors they have within this building combined. Also, looking at their energy usage patterns of significant energy wastage, both in the evenings and at weekends when there's almost zero occupancy. Moving on from that, obviously with changes in working styles and new technologies coming on stream, the way that assets are really being used, or not as the case may well be, is changing. The usage in office spaces continuing to obviously fluctuate. On the flip side, occupiers in industrial settings, particularly operating heavy and energy-intensive equipment, are switching usage and shift patterns to adjust to peaks and troughs of energy pricing in order to reduce costs. So one company we spoke to recently found it cheaper to actually employ an overnight workforce and pay them an additional wage rather than paying the peak energy prices. Again, with that, we've also seen moves from occupiers working alongside their landlords, or trying to work alongside their landlords to install their own on-site renewable energy generation. Obviously, that allows both reduction in overall costs and reducing carbon footprints, and depending which way you're looking at it, scope 1, 2, or 3 in those terms. Ultimately, the way we feel, there needs to be collaboration and support between both occupiers and landlords in order to give them the information they need to start reducing energy costs and help transfer to a greener consumption. And obviously, all this requires a more active landlord-occupier relationship. And we're starting to see this with more and more of our kind of forward-thinking clients.
Indeed. And back to you, Camille. I mean, we did a survey of all our tech partners at the back end of last year, and one of the things that came out quite often was a challenge often around showing credible return on investment. And clearly, for a landlord with an existing rent roll, if they're looking at kind of significant capex, capital expenditure, they want to see an ROI from their perspective. How are you helping and justifying these kind of capex and ROI discussions with landlords?
Yeah, so when we're looking at a full deployment of lots of the things that we've mentioned, solar, wind, EV, battery, software, we will spend a lot of time working on the business case with our customers, understanding their key drivers, those of their occupiers, in order to create a well-designed system. Generally, they're aiming for a yield of 12 to 15% with a payback period of less than 6 to 7 years. And whilst doing this, there are kind of both tangible and intangible benefits to take into account. The first and most obvious is a reduction in energy wastage and therefore costs, so both directly to the landlord, but then also indirectly to their occupiers, which in some cases can merit charging a green premium in rent over time. The second benefit is around driving new revenue streams. So landlords up until now have really only had a rental lever to pull in order to make more money. By deploying things like solar or wind in some cases, they can now generate green energy, which they can resell to occupiers at around 20p per kilowatt hour, as opposed to the usual 30p if drawing down from the grid. So this is really win-win. Landlords are generating new revenue streams and occupiers have cheaper, greener energy. It's also important to note that these systems should last 15, 20, 25 years. So you can forecast these revenue streams and savings out for a considerable period of time. We also encourage the incorporation of batteries and microgrid solutions, which, yes, there is a cost associated, but they also allow for the most efficient management and optimization of any energy that you are generating, thereby actually improving the ROI considerably. And then on top of that, you can look at layering services like EV charging, which is designed to draw down as much as possible from your green energy system. You can include variable tariffs for private or public vehicles, the time of day, all that kind of thing, as another way to generate returns. And then we also will take a look at the intangible benefits and try to quantify these for our customers. So things like conforming to government regulations on EPC ratings, future-proofing your assets, saving time, money, precious resources on tasks which can now be done by software, the ability to attract and retain particularly energy hungry occupiers in future, to whom you'll be able to sell green, cheap energy, ability to achieve and maintain energy performance certifications, access to green financing, and then obviously risk mitigation against price fluctuations or supply shocks in future.
Indeed. Now, staying with you, actually, Camille, it can be daunting, I know, for asset owners and landlords with even small portfolios, let alone the larger ones, to sort of be quite daunted by this journey towards net zero. And, you know, as the joke always goes, you know, don't start from here. But what are their first steps? What would you recommend they do, given it may look very, very daunting to try and get there in a single leap?
Yeah, fair enough. I will cover off a few steps here, but I think one of the very first things that needs to be in place and that predates, you know, us getting involved in any way is having a set of clear goals or targets. So this could be signing up to and reporting in line with the SBTI framework. It could be just increasing your EPC ratings across your portfolio, or generating, I don't know, 70% of the energy your occupiers consume via renewable sources. The next is to understand what your current situation is. So baseline assessments, energy audits, all that kind of thing that will help you compare and prioritize sites. Obviously, as we have alluded to, lack of available data is often an issue, particularly when it comes to understanding actual consumption, something that we can resolve through deployment of agnostic data loggers, which provide a true picture of landlord consumption, tenant consumption, specific asset consumption, and then highlight energy wastage across all of these areas. So having this understanding is critical in encouraging things like more sustainable user behaviors. So basics like turning off lights, reducing water waste, not heating or cooling empty buildings, as well as enabling things like proactive maintenance on assets like your HVAC. All things that seem obvious but can make a big difference across a portfolio. And then finally, when it comes to deploying things like solar or wind, another key first step is running a fairly straightforward and inexpensive feasibility study, which again can help you to prioritize your assets in terms of suitability, and also ensure that any future systems are right-sized for existing and future occupiers. If you're then planning on reselling this energy, and Tim kind of alluded to this earlier, but a robust kind of tenant engagement strategy is vital to understand their drivers and the likelihood of them procuring energy through their landlords.
Thanks. And moving to you, Tim, it'd be nice to sort of step back a bit and looking at the clean energy technology sector as a whole. What are the challenges still facing that sector now to move forward with this agenda?
And there's a huge number of challenges. They continue to evolve and change as time goes on. I think both in terms of when clients are looking to try and generate energy, and as well as using energy in a more efficient manner. So one of the things that's being talked about in the press kind of quite wildly recently was the challenge of extremely long lead times when looking to connect to the grid. So clients do have excess capacity generation. What are they going to do with it? Obviously, you know, connection dates are obviously way off into the future, and then when companies are connected to the grid, the prices being offered from excess electricity is a fraction of the price that's actually being paid if they would consume it from the grid. So it's around kind of challenges about what do they do with that. Obviously, battery storage is obviously a natural kind of fit in with that. Moving on from that, obviously when clients are looking to move on to these projects and try and work their way on this net zero pathway, they find the market is very fragmented and there's lots of moving parts that are required. Getting connected to the grid to resell energy, certain permits, lots of different hardware providers, lots of installers, lack of support raises a challenge, and they're only going on this net zero journey once. There are organisations out there like Network Control Group with ourselves, but we do this on a day-to-day basis. So we come in almost like a joined up end-to-end solution rather than lots of different providers doing lots of separate disconnected tasks. So what a lot of people are looking for is just one company or one organisation that can provide the EV, the solar, the civil, and the software solutions to back up what's the hardware and support throughout the life of the projects. But when clients have gone through this technology transformation or starting on this journey, what we're hearing time and time again is they don't understand what the benefits of it. So that we hear things like, I've got solar panels on my roof, I don't know what they're doing, I don't know what they're generating, how they're benefiting me, if they're even working. So it's imperative that staying this transition to clean energy, the organisations, the companies understand, got the data to understand the benefits and the ROI their investments are producing, so they can continue to reinvest into these future technologies. And obviously, we talked about earlier on, there's often disconnect between landlords wanting to act and occupiers, particularly large sheds, not wanting to, say, share their energy consumption data, or vice versa. So often there's this lack of alignment between the landlords and the occupiers, despite them aiming for the same outcome.
Yeah, it's an irony, that, isn't it? That lacking of sharing data when actually it's a shared outcome that people are after. I mean, back to you, Camille. I mean, we talked earlier about the kind of these first steps, these initial steps on the journey that landlords need to take. But I mean, if back to that landlord perspective, I mean, obviously, they're, on the one hand, they want to optimize their energy usage and also think about energy generation. What would be the key things you'd recommend to look at, really, to prioritize for a landlord?
Sure. So we have mentioned a couple of these sort of in passing, but I'll go through them again. So the first one is making sure you have data on actual consumption, which so many people just don't. And you're also thinking about forecasting for future consumption. So what types of tenants can you foresee moving into your spaces in future? And that will help you right size any green energy deployment, both for today and for the future. And it will also highlight whether you are actually using everything that you're drawing down from the grid, or if a portion of it is being wasted along the way, which it often is. And you can start to kind of pinpoint where that is and make changes. We've banged on a bit about batteries, but factoring in battery storage, either on its own or alongside a solar deployment, will allow you to store cheap grid energy overnight and solar energy during the day, which can then be discharged to offset the grid during peak times. Microgrid software, or some kind of controlling software that can automatically ensure your energy generation is maximized and used in its most efficient manner. You enter rules into these platforms, and then they basically take care of the rest. You don't need someone specially trained on your team to be monitoring these things all the time. Encouraging EV charging on site, or at least future-proofing sites for EV, which is inexpensive and uncomplicated when you are already doing things like a large solar deployment anyway. And then finally, again, going back to the basics, encouraging sustainable behaviors, either with occupiers or your staff. You could go as far as gamifying things in order to achieve certain targets, which a global retailer who is a client of Univers has used these platforms to do as well.
Thanks, Camille. Tim, across to you. I'd like to probe a bit more, if I may, around the whole topic of energy storage in getting to net zero, because there's obviously discussions at the national grid level about actually how you make sure that kind of base load is actually being supported when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. So there's obviously that macro scale of energy storage. But I'm really keen to hear your perspective about energy storage from a kind of an asset level perspective, and how important that is, and how feasible it is to kind of have the kind of right storage that can actually smooth these baseload requirements out and make best use of the energy when you are gathering it.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier on, there's kind of lots of talk about these kind of battery energy storage systems at the vast kind of grid level, and you can see them as you go up and down the motorways from time to time. But it's equally as important on the micro level. Obviously, as you mentioned, more and more people are investing in wind and in solar production themselves. And by their very nature, these renewable energy sources are intermittent. The sun doesn't shine at night, the wind doesn't always blow. And so a lot of the energy that could be being produced by the PV and the wind either in effect goes to waste, because the clients, they're sending it back to the grid, they're getting kind of pence on the pound in effect. So it allows these companies that have made these significant investments to really maximize the benefits, so they can store it and they can deploy it back to their facilities as and when they absolutely require. So when energy demand is far higher, so the peaks, the troughs of shift work patterns, for example, or the office being open and closed, or when that renewable generation is low and it's not sunny or it's not windy, for example. And we're finding there's a demonstrable ROI saving through installing batteries in addition to PV panels. I think Camille mentioned some ROI statistics earlier on at client sites, where they're able to efficiently and effectively use the energy that they've been self-generating. So yeah.
So Camille, back to you, if I may. And I'm very conscious that a lot of asset owners and landlords will have already installed a degree of technology around their assets, whether it's sensors, whether it's building management systems. And I guess the question really is, will those systems be fit for purpose? Are there going to need to be some updates or upgrades to actually get these net zero targets achieved with the existing digital infrastructure people have already invested in?
Sure. So at a micro level, again, there's fairly straightforward things like making sure metering systems are in place so that you have reliable, accurate energy data. I was speaking to a large landlord the other day who was saying that he was taking over a build-to-rent development, and smart meters just hadn't been factored into his budget, so he was having to go back and kind of squeeze them in somehow. But having these systems in place will give you a better understanding of the operation of key systems within your portfolio, so your HVAC, your lighting, any other plant machinery, and allow you to tackle energy intensive or inefficient assets in a logical order. And you can tie this information in with your asset renewal strategy. So you're not just looking at how often things are breaking down, but you're also considering how much energy they're consuming to get a more holistic view on when assets should be replaced, and then also the impact this will have on your budget and also your building performance. If you have solar or wind energy generation in place, it's worth looking at how you might be able to upgrade this to maximize the deployment. We've spoken to a lot of people in the past who've deployed solar on its own or inherited sites with only solar on them, and they just aren't seeing the level of grid offsetting that they had hoped. And part of our conversation with them is around upgrading these systems again with batteries or software to be able to understand and control them better, and therefore maximize the solution and the ROI. A lot of our customers are looking at No worries, no worries. A lot of our customers are looking at introducing heat pumps, understanding the feasibility of switching their fleet to EV vehicles, things like improved waste management in buildings, lots of conversations around circular economies to track and maximize resources like rainwater. And then Tim mentioned this earlier, but a final critical piece at the building level is ensuring landlords and occupiers are communicating with each other and willing to share helpful data, which may involve updating lease agreements, as quite a few of our customers have said they're now doing, so that all parties are pulling in the same direction. This list could actually go on for quite a while, but I'll end on one that's very important for us and something that informs everything we do, and that is making sure that you're prioritizing the deployment of technology or software platforms that are open and that allow for collaboration, data sharing, future integrations, rather than these very expensive closed ecosystems that, you know, it can be very, very hard to work with. It's really only through sharing data and knowledge at all levels that we're going to be moving in the right direction.
Indeed, Camille, I think it's always worth emphasising that importance to have open data and share data, because it's a challenge that really, I think, does bedevil the whole sector in terms of having good quality data that participants can share. And I guess almost on the theme of data, perhaps I'd like to finish with you, Tim, on a question around really, you know, the kind of data analytics, the smart technologies that are out there, the ubiquitous use now of AI to do that kind of smart, large scale analysis. How do you see smart technologies helping organizations optimize energy? Because we seem to have a lot of technology out there now that can do some really, really clever, powerful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, smart technologies, I think, are absolutely vital in terms of not AI, but also kind of the IoT, so the Internet of Things coming through, are really, you know, absolutely vital in optimizing energy systems. They're allowing organizations to leverage data, they're allowing organizations to automate processes, and obviously the connectivity will be allowing them to improve energy efficiency, reduce costs, and of course, enhance sustainability. You know, we see a wide range of benefits flowing through to our clients, including, you know, new revenue streams by rethinking the way they procure and generate their energy. You know, with these smart technologies, particularly kind of IoT, we're allowing for real-time monitoring, automated alerts, and data analysis. So as soon as something goes wrong, issues can be resolved immediately. And with AI, inefficiencies can be quickly identified, predictive maintenance can be planned, and automated control can be undertaken. And obviously, the data we're producing can be linked with existing facility management systems called CMMS, or whatever you want to call them, for further analysis and asset performance, asset replacement strategies, so you can start to ensure they're working in a more efficient, more effective manner. Obviously, looking to renewable energy integration, obviously we can link generation with, say, weather forecasting, so we can look at the future, predict power outputs. energy storage management can then be kind of planned more accordingly to ensure batteries are in the right state and they can be charged during off-peak hours. We're looking what's happening with the weather and also discharging them accordingly, naturally saving on energy costs there. I think finally, smart tech also significantly reduces the cost of regulatory compliance. A lot of people are looking at obviously how much it costs in terms of energy consumption. There's huge amounts of time and effort and manpower in terms of regulation compliance and answering to investors and putting together the carbon reporting. With these latest technologies, obviously with the real-time data, it's going to automatically streamline data collection and automatic audit trails, also with in-depth reporting capabilities, including obviously that carbon accounting kind of piece, which might be used, single source of truth for scope 1, 2, and sometimes even 3. You can get your suppliers to share their data, as well as integrating with existing ERP platforms at the same time.
Indeed, well, it's been fascinating, and certainly the takeaway for me is that not only can we show a clear ROI here, it's the right thing to do, and I think, as you say, from a compliance point of view, asset owners simply have to do it. And as you both said, there's this critical issue about sharing data and making sure that landlords and tenants work much more closely together. Been a great conversation. Thanks both for your time, and I look forward to catching up again. But for today, thanks and goodbye to both of you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Bye-bye.